is now time for us to bring you our second interview. We're turning our attention to, well, what should guide the zoning, selection and zoning of presiding officers of the National Assembly. We brought this to you earlier on, and to take up this discussion is the Executive Director, OrderPaper, Oke Epia, and also the Executive Director, Halomate Foundation, and National Coordinator, Parliamentary Advocacy Network, Anderson Osibe, who is already with us in the studio.
All right, gentlemen, welcome. Of course,
thank you. Good morning.
Virtually. All right, welcome to the show. We're here before now to talk about these issues, and then we're here again to interrogate all of this. So, but let's first take Oke, who is on Zoom, joining us from London all the way. Thank you so much, Oke, and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. My pleasure to be here.
All right, so let's begin with you. While some who lost election are still nursing their defeat, those who made it to the National Assembly this time around are already jostling for positions at the National Assembly, particularly the presiding officer position and principal officer position. You have been watching the developments. How would you say this issue should be approached? Because there are some who are already claiming it is their turn, and there are some who are saying, okay, some of the zoning principles should be considered in selecting principal officers at the assembly.
Right. Thank you very much. It's important to begin by saying that elections are over. There are contestations, but those now have to be advanced to the judiciary. What we are seeing is normal for people to begin to jostle for political offices. That's what politicians do. That is their forte. But in doing that, the laws, the statutes, and practice provide some guidance, and some framework for doing that. If you look at the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, that talks about, the federal character, that offices need, or are required to be spread across to, address the diversity of Nigeria's, composition. Political parties, and the political establishment to a large extent have followed up on this whenever we have new elections, there's a new president, there's a new, of course, vice president. Political parties have tried to intervene, to make sure that the other key political offices in the National Assembly, the President of the Senate, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, and the Deputy President of the Senate are also spread, alongside, of course, the principal offices, for the majority and for the minority. So that is the practice, that is the Constitution. But what we have seen over time is a situation where, since the beginning of the Fourth Republic, if you may, a situation where this practice, noble as it is, has become impacted negatively by the ambitions, the personal ambitions and the self-serving attitude of the political class. So you've seen a situation where there has been a movement from adherence or trying to comply with the constitutional provision, power balancing, to a situation where you see parties and politicians tending towards more political patronage, and sometimes even extending it to cronyism, such that, the issue of zoning becomes so micro-based that, okay, they say this is the candidate of the party. If you're not voting, if you're not electing this candidate, then something will do this, will do that. And we have seen revolts in the past, in this Fourth Republic. So in moving down this trajectory from, power balancing to federal character, to political patronage, and the worst of it all, political cronyism, we have seen a sacrifice of competence, of character, and of capacity. So we've seen individuals thrown up as presidents of the Senate, the speakers of the House of Representatives, and the deputies in both chambers, who are falling short of what it takes to occupy, such critical offices of the country, and this, unfortunately, has impacted negatively on democratic advancement. It has impacted negatively on the delivery of government and governance to the people, what we in local parlance call democratic dividends. This has suffered. So that's why we have seen situations where you have a legislature, that is not deep and capacitated and vibrant enough to stand up to its functions of providing checks and balances to the executive. We have seen legislatures, the National Assembly, currently the 9th National Assembly is a good example. That is no better than, an adjunct of the presidency. That's because the presiding officers and the principal officers, are beneficiaries of microzoning, of cronyism, and a departure away from the noble objectives of power balancing and zoning as provided for by the Constitution, of the country, the constitution of political parties, and of course by practice and antecedents. So this is where we need to look at it from. We need to, at this stage, begin to drum the need for political parties, for the legislators-elect, to consider more issues of competence, of character, and of capacity, because this is indeed it is the most critical arm of government. And so if these three key qualities are sacrificed for cronyism, then we'll be in a bigger mess than we currently are. And I hope that citizens are, sensitized enough on this so that they can begin to, whatever ways they can, advocate and push for us to have a leadership of the 10th National Assembly that is able to offer service, that is able to stand its ground, that is vibrant, and that is able to make sure that we don't have a situation that we have had in the last 8 years, where the National Assembly has been, like they rightly say, a rubber stamp of the executive.
All right, let me come to Anderson here in the studio, because I know that 6 out of the 10 principal officers in the parliament will not be returning, with the last election, and then the new ones are like brides to be courted, by those who want to be principal officers at the National Assembly, as well as issues that has arisen, like he mentioned, on religion, culture, zoning. But then the issue of capacity comes to play, the issue of experience. We have a very dynamic new 10th Assembly to emerge. What should be the priority in choice going ahead?
Okay, thank you so much. Before I start, let me first of all react to what my brother Oke just said. Let me make you understand that zoning is not constitutional. It's not in our constitution, right? It's a party arrangement, okay, that started in 1999, that later became a norm. Everybody is now talking about zoning. Political parties came up with the idea of zoning so that the 6 geopolitical zones will be carried along. Now, coming to your question, I was in your studio 2 weeks ago, and I told you, and I'm not shifting ground. I'm telling you, and I want to repeat myself again, that there are 2 things we should look out for the National Assembly leadership positions. Number 1, it's federal character, which boils down to zoning. Then number 2 is competence, right? Now, talking about zoning, like I said the other time, I said we have 6 geopolitical zones in Nigeria. Now, based on the last election, Southwest is gone, and Northeast is gone. So we are now left with 4 zones, which is the South-South, the Southeast, the North-Central, and the Northwest. So we must look for a way to balance this power for political stability. Now, when you are looking at competence, you look at 2 things are involved. Firstly, you look at the ranking rule. What does the ranking rule say? The ranking rule says that a senator who has been re-elected and returning, or a member of the House of Representatives who has been re-elected and returning for the 2nd time or for the 3rd time, that gives him that level of, it gives him that opportunity to want to contest for either the speakership position or the Senate presidency's position. So now, based on what we have on ground, based on the people we have on ground so far, we have those who have come out, who have been jostling to be Senate president, who have those who have been jostling to be speaker, and all that. Now, we are saying, what we are basically saying at this point in time is that we want to wait for the political party in power, which is the APC. Everybody's waiting for the APC to come out with its zoning formula, right? Because if they don't do it on time, if the zoning formula doesn't come out on time, it will take us back to 2015, where we had some members of the political party who went against the party to produce the Senate President and the Speaker, right? Because we've seen a couple of people. We've seen the present chairman, Senate Committee on Appropriations, Jibrin Barrow, who has declared his intention to be Senate President. We've seen Honorable Betara, these guys he's from Borno State. These guys are working. Now, what do you say to them? These guys have been working. These guys have been meeting people, okay, and the people are aligning with them, and the party is not saying anything about it. The party is not saying anything about zoning. The party is not saying anything about how they want to share these political offices.
Okay, let me come in here, Anderson, because if you look at since the beginning of the Fourth Republic, you've had South is the only zone that has never produced a Senate President. You also have the South.
Not only South.
And then you have the South and the North Central are the only zones that have never produced the House of Representatives Speaker. And these things are out there in the public, even for the politicians and the politically literate to see in clear black and white. Why do you think that the parties are stalling? Because you've said something very instructive. The more the delay, the more there is a possibility that they may jettison this process and bring in someone who is not really a favorite.
Can you comment?
Why do you think the delay? What do you think is cursing this? Is it because there are so much at stake and they need to be careful in the choice and make sure, looking at the fact that we already have a president-elect that is Muslim and we also have a vice president-elect that is also Muslim? Isn't it very instructive to be careful in the choice of the principal officers going forward? And it shouldn't be just based on sentiments on capacity.
Okay, well, let me make you understand something, right? You see, I feel one of the major reasons why the party is still delaying is because probably maybe that they are still consulting. Okay, now because the Muslim ticket, has already jettisoned a lot of things. Now, in the sense that if we had a Christian president who is from the Southwest, it would have been very easy. It would have been easier for us, the political party, to come up with their zoning formula. But I think, as it stands now, I think the party and even the president-elect is still consulting, and also the party leadership is also still consulting. So, but I want to please kindly at this point, appeal to the APC that for whatever they need to do as far as this zoning is concerned, they should do it and do it right on time. Because if care is not taken, I want to repeat, if care is not taken, we will definitely go back to the 2015 experience, where we had the Saraki and the Dogara coming up to take up leadership against the APC, against the plans of the political party.
Was that a wrong move at the time?
Well, no, based on the party arrangement, that was a wrong move. Okay, but based on now, let me take you back. Let me tell you something. I came here the other time and I told you, I said that since 1999, there's no Senate president or speaker, all right, who has been an establishment of the executive that survived impeachment. Okay, when you look at it from 1999, from the time of Nwabara, from the time of Nwabara, 1999 to 2003, even down to Etie in the House of Reps, and even down to Salisu Buhari in 1999, you see that these guys we are product of the executive, and members of the National Assembly at that time, felt that the best thing to do at that time, was to impeach them. Because they wanted their own Senate president, they wanted their own speaker, they wanted their own person that they can relate freely with. Okay? So, and I did say that it is only Ahmed Lawan and Femi Gbajabiamila that has been the product of the executive that survived impeachment. Why? Probably, I don't know. Probably maybe the guys who are there now don't have the balls, to move for their impeachment. So when you look at that history, you begin to know that it's something that the APC, as a political party, needs to be very, very, very careful about. Okay? In not anointing any particular party, any particular candidate, by coming up to open up the zoning formula, so that everybody, we will not channel our attention to the zones. Now, I said that we want a situation where the Senate President should be zoned to the south. The speakership should be zoned to the north. So that when we go to the south, we can micro-zone and say, okay, it's either going to the south-south or it's going to the southeast.
All right, let me bring in Oke here. Okay, I know you're listening to Anderson clearly, and he said something here. He said open up the zoning formula, and perhaps when we get to the subsects, we'll begin to microzone. And while you're also looking at that issue of zoning formula, remember one of the things that OrderPaper has asked oftentimes is for Nigerians to be part of the conversation on who the principal officers are at the National Assembly. And we are talking about fairness, equity, justice. It starts from the parliament. It starts from representation. So what would be your take? To zone or not to zone?
Well, it's difficult to discard zoning because it's a power balancing act. But to the extent that it has been, corrupted, if not bastardized, by the same political class at the level of the political parties, and even by the politicians themselves in the National Assembly, then we probably need to begin to review our acceptance of the principles of zoning. But as we currently have it, it's inevitable that we have to look at zoning. It is difficult to shove down the throat of Nigerians in a multi-ethnic, diverse, multi-religious country like Nigeria, to have the kind of presidency that we have for going forward, and not to consider all of that in choosing the leaders of the National Assembly. Even though we have seen, examples of these things happen before. I mean, just this current assembly, we have the Speaker of the House of Representatives, who is from the same zone as the Vice President of the country. We have seen in the 7th Assembly, where we had the Speaker of the House of Representatives as a Muslim, and the Deputy Speaker too was a Muslim. That's the gentleman from Abeokuta, Ogun State, and his deputy. Both were Muslims. Even currently, the speaker and his deputy, they are Muslims. So this is what I'm saying, because the parties have gone the way of micro-zoning. They have gone the way of sacrificing competence as against, competence and patriotism, and push forward, individual and selfish agenda. We are now having this conversation. And from the look of things currently, the current political party, has set certain precedents for itself, and because this is a party, and this is speaking to the delay that my colleague talks about. There must be delay. It's inevitable because there are contending interests in the ruling All Progressive Congress. Don't forget that this is one party that has been more divided against itself, than being united. And so now when it comes to this kind of contestation for the principal presiding officers of the National Assembly, there's bound to be delay. There's bound to be a lot of horse trading, and the party may not get it right. It will be difficult for the party to stamp its authority, and we do not see a situation. We cannot rule out a situation where what happened in 2015 with Bukola Saraki and Ekweremadu not happening. Because right now, especially in the House of Reps, the party does not command an overwhelming majority in the House of Representatives. So it must do a lot of work with the other political parties if it wants to retain the edge and have a smooth say with respect to the choice of the presiding officers of the House of Representatives. So there is a factor that we tamper it. But again, we need to keep taking this conversation to Nigerians. We unfortunately, though, they don't have a role. They don't have any way they can vote for who becomes the Speaker, and Deputy Speaker becomes the President of the Senate and Deputy President of the Senate. But they can begin to raise their voice voices and speak around issues of equity, fairness, and justice, and speak around on one hand, and on the other hand, speak about competence, capacity, and your antecedents. Where are you coming from? What have you done? Why should the conversation should not be about it is my turn? Like one of them has said, for one of them contesting for the president of the Senate. It should not be about it is my turn. And that is because the APC campaigned or arrived at its presidential candidate, because of that kind of rhetoric. So you see it cascading down, and this is the issue with the ruling party. So again, it is a good thing that they do not have that commanding majority. So if the other political parties are strategic, they can play a role or two to see that in the interest of Nigerians, in the interest of effective service delivery, in the interest of a vibrant legislature, that will deliver services, that will stand up to its expectations of checks and balances, that will be able to provide effective oversight over the executive. We should have officers in the presiding capacities of both chambers who have competence, capacity, and character. The conversation should by no means be talking about it is my turn, or it must be microzone to my area. And because the precedents and antecedents is there, you can no longer put out those kind of canvassing. You have a situation like I just mentioned where, the both presiding officers in the House of Representatives are from a certain religion, and that is based to the past. So we may see a situation where, in the emergence of who becomes the president of the Senate, who becomes the deputy president of the Senate, who becomes the speaker of the House of Representatives, who becomes the deputy speaker of the House of Representatives, some kind of replay of what happened in 2015, some kind of replay of what happened in 2011, because that's the precedence, when PDP was the ruling party. We had that situation where members themselves, they didn't want the imposition by the party, and so they rallied among themselves and elected the gentleman they felt should be the speaker and the deputy speaker of the House of Representatives. And that was the precedence as far as the Fourth Republic is concerned. And that was what happened again in 2015. So it may happen again, and I think, if you ask me, I think it may be just in the interest of Nigeria and Nigerians for that to happen, especially when we have a ruling party that is more divided against itself than united. You have interests, contending interests that want to advance their individual selfish agenda and decimate the national interest and national agenda. Then I think Nigerians should begin to weigh in on the conversation. And let's see which are the best foods we have to put forward. You want to be speaker. What is your antecedents in the current 9th National Assembly? What bills did you sponsor? What significant contribution did you make to gender? What significant contribution did you make to the fight against poverty? Electricity. What bills, what motions? These are the questions. And it has nothing to do with just the numbers of the bills or the number of motions. Where are those bills? And this is the piece of the work that we have done over the years with respect specifically to the 9th National Assembly. We have profiled these individuals. And sooner than later, we'll be releasing their scorecards. Anyone who is electing to be presiding officers, we will release the scorecard for the public to see. If the members of the National Assembly want to ignore those scorecards, then let it be on record that these are individuals. This is where they stand on certain issues. This is what they have done. This is their capacity. This is their competence level, and then let them decide. And let Nigerians judge for themselves. Okay, look, again, we'll probably be running through another cycle of a rubber stamp legislature, of a legislature that is not able to hold its own against the executive, a legislature that is not able to deliver effective service for the good governance of the country and the deepening of democracy for Nigeria. So that's the point. We need to, at this point, continue to advocate, for the issues. Move the conversation away from all of this selfish agenda being promoted by politicians and by the political parties. It does not do the country any good at the end of the day.
All right. Okay. Yeah, still staying with you. While it is important, utmostly really important for experience, ranking, and ability to guide the legislature to take center stage here, you're also saying that in zoning, in trying to choose these competent leaders, they should also consider federal character and zoning, at least to ensure power balancing. So let's look at away from zoning. Should religion really be an issue here? Some lawmakers are saying religion has never been a problem really for the National Assembly. But because of the fact that this time around we have a Muslim ticket for the president-elect and his vice, which of course, caused some kind of ripples in some quarters. So in looking at the National Assembly, should such a thing also be something that should be considered to also ensure balance and, acceptability by all?
point on there you made, it's inevitable that we cannot discard zoning. My advocacy is against microzoning, like the parties and politicians are wont to do. We cannot discard zoning on the front of religion. We cannot discard zoning on the front of the region. It would be unfair for you to have the presiding officers come from, the regions where the president and the vice presidents, would be coming from. You will not be doing justice to the South-South zone that has never had the opportunity to be president of the Senate, not speaker of the House of Representatives, for instance. It would be unfair for you to have a Muslim presiding officer in the National Assembly when you have the two frontmost, offices of the country who are already of that religious faith. How do you build a nation? How do you inspire confidence? How do you, address the diversity of Nigerians if you do this? But unfortunately, like I said, the ruling All Progressive Party, as we have it, has not been able to hold its own together to use these issues to advance both the building of its own party, and the democracy, consolidation of democracy in Nigeria. And that is why you have, individuals who have not been in parliament, for instance, seeking to become president of the Senate. Because you have been a governor for 8 years, that does not qualify you to come to the Senate, and the first thing you want to do is to be president of the Senate. Who does that? It's not conventional in anywhere in the world where ranking is discarded on the altar of political expediency or on the altar of political cronyism. We should not allow that kind of thing to happen. But again, there is a precedents. You see, in the 8th National Assembly, we saw Godswill Akpabio come to the Senate for the first time, and he was able to back the position of minority leader. Minority leader of the Senate, a position that is by practice, parliamentary practice, reserved for ranking. And you saw what became of that. Eventually ditched the party and move on to the ruling party. And that's because the political process is not being deepened by politicians. They abuse the process, just like the issue of defection from political party to the other party. There's been an abuse, serious abuse of the law, of the constitution, of the political party statutes. So, because the interest of the politician, especially in a party that is not able to wield control over the contending political interests that compose it, this is what you find. So it is not for me a matter of delay by the APC. For me, what are the stronger or the strongest political interests pushing? Look at the graphics showing up. There is an antecedent from the Fourth Republic up until now. From 1999 on to this present moment, there has been an attempt by the politicians, by the political parties to balance. There's been an attempt, to torpedo this balance by the parties themselves, like I've been explaining, by the politicians themselves, like we saw in 2011 and 2015. But then, all of this is not because these politicians and the parties want necessarily a very vibrant legislature, a legislature that is able to withstand its ground and promote checks and balances, a legislature that is able to ensure effective service delivery and provide oversight, robust oversight by the executive. That is not the case. Otherwise, we will not be where we are currently, where the indices of development are very poor. They are all looking south. Where Nigeria is the poorest country in the world, the poverty capital of the world, where the healthcare system is broken. That is why our leaders, find it fancy to go abroad for medical care. A situation where the, children who are out of school in this country are over 20 million. A situation where the debt of this country is abominable. So we will not be where we are if we have a legislature that lives up to its billing. And that is the point that we are calling on citizens and stakeholders, to make. We should not just stand by and say, it's their internal affairs, and then otherwise we'll be down another 4 years, 8 years, what have you, of debilitating socio-economic conditions.
All right, okay. And Nigerians do await, that scorecard that your organization intends to release in a short while to be able to check the track record of those who are, looking to get to that position. So we'll come back to the studio now.
All right, Anderson, because he's spoken quite clearly that you cannot, because of religion, jettison the issue of zoning. Of the 14 Senate President Nigeria has had, only 2, Saraki and Dr. Ahmed, have been Muslims. And, it establishes the fact that religion has never mattered in the parliament. And again, you look at the issue that, we've had Christians until 2015, and since, of course, Bukola took over the gavel. Even though we know that that hasn't been a problem in the parliament, and he's saying that we must look at that as a factor. What's your take on that? Should we really look at the issue of religion, or focus on a parliament that looks at policy driven by people with capacity and experience?
Okay. First of all, for me, I've not been an advocate of, promoting, religion, right? I've always been promoting what I know is right and what I know that we must do, as a people and as a nation. Now, for me, religion shouldn't even come into this, equation at all, because we've seen the situation in this country where when the president was a Christian, the vice president, sorry, the Senate president was a Christian, and the deputy Senate president was also is a Christian. And you move over to the House of Reps, who had the speaker, had the deputy speaker, a Christian. So for me, I feel the most important thing in this whole conversation is for us to be able to come up with an outright zoning, right? It doesn't matter, because when you talk about religion, when I have a problem with people always bring up religion, because I do know that it's not only Christians and Muslims that we have in Nigeria. All right?
They are the majority.
Of course, they're the majority. So those ones in the minority, then who represents them? Okay? Now, what my own take is that by the time we have this zoning, right, it doesn't matter if the person is a Christian or Muslim. Now, if this,
now you're saying this vis-a-vis what is at the executive, at the level of the president-elect now, because we've not also had a same-faith ticket at that level. If you just oppose what you're saying.
Can we please,
go ahead, please.
Let me explain something to you. Can we please look at the competence of people that we want to send as our leaders? That is very important. Let's push away the issue of religion. It won't do us any good. It divides us more as a nation than it puts us together. Okay? Then for me, I'll keep advocating that what we need is just equity, fairness for political stability. Right? And for us to have that,
to give a sense of belonging,
to give a sense to every zone of this country, and for us to have that as a country, we must embrace zoning. It's very important. It doesn't matter. You can zone to southwest. Sorry, you can zone to southeast. You can zone to south-south. You can zone to north central. You can zone to anywhere. If the people of southeast decide that it's a native doctor that will represent them, good and fine. Let's flow. All right? Then the idea of coming up with the issue of religion all the time, he's a Christian, he's not a Muslim, he can't do this, he can't do that. You see, when we have political balancing in this country, we'll begin to move forward as a nation. Let's take us back to 1999, when Obasanjo was in power. The same thing he did. There was power balancing. All right? He moved it to 2007. Now, Yar'Adua came in and did the same. So we don't want a situation where, look, please, I want to beg beg my other people, other advocates, Nigerian people, to please, let's look at the issue, let's consider the issue of competence in whatever we do. And zoning, whatever. That is federal character. Everybody will be equally carried along, and everybody will be happy. You see, this issue of agitations will begin to die down naturally. But when we begin to say that because we are politicians, because we have the financial muscle to grab this power, we'll continue to have these problems, and it will live with us forever.
All right, interestingly, the National Assembly themselves, the members themselves, are saying religion has never been an issue with them and will not be an issue this time around. So we give it to them. But then let's look at some of the names that are cropping up, zeroing down to the Senate President, for instance. Some names that are, coming up. You have Ahmad Lawan also vying for that. Senator Sani Musa, Jibrin Barau, Orji Uzokalo, Goswell Akpabio, and of course we have Dave Umahi also looking for that. Abdulaziz Yari is also interested in that position. Now, is there something Nigerians themselves, the citizens themselves, can do to help, ensure that the people who eventually emerge as principal officers, are people who will truly represent them at that level of government and ensure that, there's a balance between the executive and the legislature, not just, taking in everything that comes from the executive? Do Nigerians have a role to play, really, in all of this?
Yes, definitely Nigerians have a role to play. And the role they have to play is to, keep the engagement and conversations ongoing. Because, and secondly, is to also engage their representatives, right? Because there is need to begin to engage our representatives one-on-one, okay? Tell them, the feelings of the people. Is the representative that will take the feelings of the people from the constituent, to the National Assembly. So we need to begin to, Nigerians we need to begin to do that. All right. So now let me go down to the names that you just mentioned. Now I know that Ahmed Lawa, in this contest, might just likely be a joker, because we cannot have an Ahmed Lawa Senate presidency, right? That everybody, the whole world has seen as a rubber stamp, fighting and probably struggling and lobbying to come back as the Senate president. Nigerians will not accept that. That is one. Then for Jibrin Barao, I know we are making plans to meet with him, and we want to, appeal to him to please kindly drop his ambition, so that we can have a political balance in this country, so that we can have 100% equity, so that we can have 100% unity in this country, then so that the Senate presidency can move to the South, just like we said. Then the North can retain its speakership.
All right.
Then whoever they decide, whichever zone that decides to take the speakership is good and fine for them. But please, all right, let's have a balance in this country.
Let me quickly take Oke's parting words, because in all of these conversations, okay, I'm sure you are very much aware, because you have been part of that narrative, in terms of pushing gender balance in the parliament. And with the decline in the National Assembly, with the women returning, most of the, returning officers have been dropped, and new ones have emerged. In the Senate, we have 3 new key players who have come into the Senate as female. In the National Assembly, I think we just have over 15. Now, in the choice of principal officers, the issue of balance and equity, it's really important. How do you review this for the House of Representatives? Because the Senate, we do know that there are new members. However, what's at stake here for the women in those choices?
It's a very sad story for gender as far as the 10th National Assembly is concerned. But let me just quickly reiterate my earlier position. I am not an advocate for advancement of religion over competence, character, or capacity. What I am saying is that, given the tenuous situation we find ourselves of an emerging presidency of same faith, it will be doing great injustice, to the religious sensitivity and diversity of Nigeria to discount that in the emergence, in the choice of presiding officers of the National Assembly, But we are with their zoning formula, the zoning formula of the political parties. So back to your question, what we see in the House of Representatives particularly, in the Senate particularly, is pathetic, because perhaps for the second time running, the second, time running, second assembly running, we would not likely to have a principal officer.
That's how we wrap up this show today, and we thank you for your thoughts all the way from London, where you joined us virtually. We've been speaking with Oke Epia, founder, OrderPaper, and of course Anderson Usiebe, Executive Director, Halomesa Foundation and National Coordinator of Parliamentary Advocacy Network. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time with us. Of course, it's a developing story. We'll continue this conversation until we get to the presiding officers and people who will represent Nigerians truly well at that level of parliament. Thank you once again. My name is Koli Omaidu. Have a great day.